I like the idea that it'll be broadly available. I like the idea that it's the right price for the mainstream market, for the average pet keeper.
Yeah.
I like the idea that it's really easy to store and use, and it has a decent shelf life. And I like that it's clean and easy to use. But most of all, I like that it's convenient, and the fact that you can know exactly what you're feeding every single time. So we're here with John Courteney-Smith from Arcadia, and I just want to start by saying thank you for inviting us to be part of the launch of your new product, which sounds extremely interesting. But I guess the first thing we should ask is, what exactly are we looking at here? What exactly is this product, John?
Well, the product's called Evo RX. It's a method of feeding snakes that doesn't use farmed rodents, that is clean, tested, easy to feed, easy to store, and we hope that it will enable many, many more reptile keepers to come into the hobby.
Well, that's really interesting. It gives us a lot to work with and unpack there, and so maybe we should start at the beginning of that. Well, why not feed rodents? It's what we've been doing for many years to certain degrees of success, seemingly. Why do we need something different? What's the problem with farmed rodents?
To answer your question, nothing per se. You know, farmed rodents can really still make up part of the diet if you want them to, and variety feeding is really essential. With Evo RX, we have a solution where you don't have to rely on frozen rodents anymore. There's certain attributes within Evo RX which makes it a more desirable feeding option, I believe. You know, we do see worrying levels of obesity in snake keeping.
So let's unpack that bit. Why is Evo RX better, and why are frozen rodents contributing to that problem?
Well, the first reason which we see so much obesity in reptile care is that people care for their animals. In one respect, they're being responsible but irresponsible at the same time. We humanise our pets, and you know, reptiles are generally quite active, particularly snakes. You assume they're hungry, so we overfeed. That's one reason. The second reason that we see increased levels of obesity is portion control.
Yes.
So when we're farming rodents, of course, and each different farm have different tolerances for when they're taking their harvest, you can have food weights that are maybe 10 or 12 grams different per size, particularly in the large sizes. So if you buy a frozen rodent from X supplier and they're on the heavy side of things, and it's your habit to feed 2 of those a week, it would only be the same as feeding pretty much 1.5 from another supplier. So what we've been able to do is create a diet that has very tight weight tolerances, and this is made per weight. So we've taken an average per usual weight class from pinky to jumbo, and created a weight that's bang in between the usual weight tolerances of each size. So if you look at an Evo RX feed and think, oh my God, this is too small, it's sold by weight rather than size. And when you're looking at large rodents, there's quite a body cavity in there, quite a lot of fluid, quite a lot of air,
fur and
everything. So actually, when you drill it down to meat content, it's not always there.
That's interesting, in that you're getting the same amount of nutrients and as something that would look much bigger if it was offered in the shape of a mouse.
Absolutely.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
So, and it's very reassuring as well, because on first sight, people might think that Evo RX isn't going to be enough of a meal, when actually...
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, because we go back to the original point. We care for our animals, and nobody wants to see a hungry animal.
Yeah.
We've all had a hungry dog at our feet begging, even though they've eaten 10 times today.
You're not wrong.
we do the same for reptiles. It's cruising around, it must be hungry. Or I feed every Thursday. Well, you
Regardless,
shouldn't. You shouldn't. So you can use Evo RX in exactly the same way as farmed rodents. As I say, there's 6 sizes from pink to jumbo, and you can use it for nest raiding. You can feed a couple of small ones. You can feed a jumbo one, depending on the size of your own snake. All within good portion control. So you can work out what weights you need per week or bi-weekly. You can work in rest cycles. You can use it for variety feeding, as I said before, or as a complete diet. So portion control really comes into it. We overfeed out of kindness, and we overfeed accidentally through weight issues.
A medium mouse isn't a medium mouse, and we can't really say exactly what a medium mouse weighs or what the nutritional content of that prey item is.
No.
And that's different with Evo RX, I take it?
It's very different. So as part of the project, we did go back into analysing rodent nutritional values again from farmed sources. I think it's the first laboratory test that's been done for a long time. So we've got good nutritional data in terms of proteins and fats, etc. And comparing that against other prey sources, it's good to have a benchmark.
Yeah.
With Evo RX, of course, this is a very lean solution. It's avian based. Our weight tolerances are greatly smaller than that which we see from farmed rodents. So if you want to feed a 12-gram food, and the feeding parcel, that's the size of food or weight of food that your animal needs, you're going to get it every time within a very small tolerance.
So 12 grams will be 12 grams, and it'll have the same nutritional components if you buy it this week, next year.
Absolutely. And of course, our protein source will have a tolerance. It's British farmed. There's going to be a slight tolerance there. But we've taken nutritional values published on the packaging from whole sets of laboratory testing, and then taken a very good average from that. We were then able to take some historic data for wild prey sources and compare the nutritional parts of those feeder animals to compare with what wild snakes and other reptiles may be eating. That was really one of the epiphany moments, really, because we suddenly realised that the food that we've been feeding recently, or over the last couple of decades, is not quite as balanced in terms of its protein to fat ratio and its amino acid complex as is the wild variety. So we actually used data published for the American grass mouse as a kind of
benchmark
average prey source for colubrids. This whole product has been designed around colubrids, really. So we really wanted to focus in on that group. We keep so many of them as a hobby, and to find a source that would be more wild-like for them, that would be more wild-like in its nutrition and how they dealt with it. And so as part of our ongoing testing, we had amino acid profiles taken from farmed rodents and from the Evo RX food, and then compared that with data that we had for the American grass mouse. And what we found very interestingly was that the amino profile of Evo RX is much more likely in its balance for the aminos to actually serve as proteins that can be used for growth, and actually the fats also. So whereas we can see problematic fats in some historic prey sources because they're unlike the profiles of the wild, the whole concept of evolution kicks in now. So we kind of cause obesity by overfeeding, by not having good weight tolerances, and having food that sometimes could have a amino to fat ratio and an amino to fat profile that is not wild-like.
A farmed rat is kept under optimal conditions, and under human care, they will obviously fare better than a wild rat or a wild mouse, of course. So it's body composition is going to be different. It's going to be very well fed, very well cared for, whereas most wild animals and most wild rodents will have a very different life and a very different body composition. Is that about right?
That's exactly right. And actually, the more we looked into it, the more we saw that these periods of boom and bust in wild nutrient gleaning is actually what makes them so good. So wild prey types from the wild, I think we have to exclude those rodents that live in suburban areas.
Yes,
for this.
That's a different type of rodent.
Yeah. So, but they are leaner. Their amino acid profiles are more balanced. Their fat levels are lower. As part of the test, we had probably the most obese corn snake I've ever seen in my career and hobby, and it was a real job to try and convert that very old snake into a life where it could be leaner, healthier, be able to. It couldn't move. Actually, it just was very sedentary. Wouldn't move. But it was being killed with kindness. The previous owners, we'd taken it as a rehome, adored it, and they adored it so much that they overfed it until it basically couldn't move. So we're not, obviously Evo RX is not a weight loss diet. We're not saying that at all, but we can use its nutrient profile and the very fact that it has very narrow portion control to help manage weights or help snakes that are historically obese come back down into a fighting weight.
You mentioned there a moment ago something that we discussed before when we were preparing for this podcast about older animals and old animals that had apparently stopped growing, but with the diet that changed?
Yeah, I mean, this it's unexplainable in one respect, but I think we do have an explanation in another. We had 2 or 3 snakes in our collection. The test collection was split over 3, so we had numbers of snakes in 3 locations, all being fed the diet, and then a collection of snakes that were just being fed rodents for well over a year, and we were watching their weights, etc., etc. And what we noticed, we had 2 particular snakes of completely different species. One was a rat snake and one was a hognose snake, although we did see this replicated a number of times. But in terms of, wow, what's going on here? We had 2 snakes that were adult age. So they were well over 5 years old, or between 5 and 7 years old. They'd gone past that state of growth, really. They should have put their length on by that time, although we kind of understand reptiles don't necessarily stop growing. But what we saw was adult animals that had been adults for a while become more lean, more active, but actually start to grow in length visually.
Wow.
So you could see this, not overnight, but as the months went on, you could see these snakes becoming remarkably longer, faster, fitter, lither. And that was a real juxtaposition for me. You know, on one hand, we've got healthy, fully grown snakes that had been in my personal collection for quite a while, over a year, and one of them 6 years or so.
Okay.
On the other hand, we were seeing a change in the body score, positively, but also growing in length when we've got grown animals. So how do you explain that away? The only thing we had done was move them totally over to Evo RX as their sole food.
That's interesting.
And off I go down a rabbit hole and try and find the reason, because I have to know what's caused this. This is a phenomenon. It shouldn't really happen, but we saw it time and time again. We had another snake that it was a hognose snake that was stunted by its previous care. From what we understand, it was fed a fish-only diet for a long period of time. And so we brought it into our care, and this was before Evo RX, so it was getting some rodent food. We were trying to build it up. But it wasn't until it moved onto this diet, which it takes voraciously. They will chase you down for this. There'd be some fantastic film of hognoses chasing this food down. But that snake, again, was 4 to 5 years old. Tiny, but stopped growing. Now it's a pretty sizable animal, but lean and fast and actually quite aggressive.
Right.
So, all signs of
Quite a turnaround, isn't it?
Yeah, of a happy, healthy animal that's turned around from being, you and I, as professionals would say, that's under a year old. Right. But it was 5-ish, we believe. So trying to find out what caused that, we went back to the amino acid profiles. With the amino test, we found that our food was quite high in things like proline. And what proline will do is open that pathway towards collagen production. So what we're finding is that the amino acid complex not only does it cause steady lean growth, but it's also weighted towards the production of things like collagen. And where you have collagen, you have the potential for growth. The bone health increases and the scales and skin are able to stretch and grow. And so our best guess at the moment is that we've got this fantastic protein level of a very bioavailable amino source, and that these proteins or aminos, both the same thing, being high in things like proline, are able to cause a natural level of the elements that we need for growth. So, and collagen is essential for that. So our best guess, my best educated guess, is that this is the provision of a diet that leans towards collagen production, and that's why we see the growth.
The depth to which you've gone with the research seems to be considerable.
Yes, the research document, much to the annoyance of the staff here, is 20,000 words. So just the research document behind the project, keeping notes about the project, what we've found out, data, thoughts and thinkings and conclusions, it's about 300 words, under 20,000 words. So we've tried to really go deep into that. And I always keep these journals. We keep them. I'm coming up for my 20th year in the company now. I try and keep these for all of the new projects so I can look back and see where we started at point A. And
I wouldn't expect any less from you, John.
I know. I'm quite strange to work with.
Well, it's important to get the depth behind it. I mean, it's nice to be able to launch these things to a clientele that will understand it in a way that they'll understand it. But it's essential that you've done the research to back it up as well. And that kind of brings me on. That brings me on to my next question: is how successful has it been? You've been trialing this now for how many years?
The project is over 5 years old in concept. And I was brought into the project to add some leadership and devise practical testing, etc. Put the science back into it about 2 years ago. And so we collated groups of corns, rats, milks, the target species of colubrids. And we went through close to 15 different recipe variations before we ended up with the final mix.
And how long was that process? So you started with your first test recipe to launch. How long was that process?
That process started just after the end of the pandemic.
So you've had
actually it's longer than I thought.
Good 4 or 5 years then.
Yeah, and there was work done on it by the wider company beforehand in concepting which way do we go. We really have put a huge amount of work into it. It's not just me. There's a whole huge team of people that have been working on this. Some of the best vets in the country having oversight, checking my math, checking the formula, checking the nutrition, giving active feedback, just so that we're consistently producing the best product as we can. We had this triple set of test animals, which were our kind of formal test base, but then a much wider selection of animals as well from private collections within staff here and at our parent company. So we actually ended up testing the food over the test base of colubrids, which is the focus of the product. for that whole period. Many species, as many as you can think. We tested it with as many colubrids as we, or prime colubrids as we could.
Give me a rundown of species just off the top of your head.
We had corns of all colours, black rats, Russian rats, ladder snakes, bull snakes, milk snakes, king snakes of all different variations and localities. We had carpet pythons, rosy boas, red-tailed boas, hognoses. Hognoses were the real surprise here. I would say that it is almost guaranteed that your pet hog will take this food on the first feed. They are voracious for it. Every single animal, over many dozens, have gone to it on the first feed or very close to it.
Why is hognose? Why hognoses?
I can't work it out particularly. They just seem to love it. There's something in the scent. There's something that gets them going, and they will chase you around the cage. It's great for scent training, great enrichment.
Yeah.
And they will eat reliably, regularly, very, very well. So the test space was huge, over massive amount of species, from snakes all the way through to monitor lizards and other omnivores. We fed as many animals as we could. Over colubrids, we found, by the time we got to the final recipe, the recipe that's going out into the public, that we had 70% of snakes, give or take 1 or 2%, seasonally, because we have this up and down of feeding seasonally. But it was we were suggesting 70% would take the food from the first feed.
Wow. And how about thereafter? I mean, what kind of uptake do you get on the second, third? Eventually, am I right in thinking that eventually pretty much everything takes it after a couple of attempts?
There will always be the odd animal that won't.
The one fussy.
We get that.
Yeah.
You know, every animal is its sentient, it's its own creature, and you'll get the odd one that just will
doesn't
not
want to play.
Our experience is that it's fleetingly rare, and that eventually there's some certain tips and tricks which are on our website to help you encourage your snake to feed. We've never had to force feed. We've never had to assist feed.
If I'm a keeper and I've got a snake, what's the odds that my snake is going to get onto Evo RX within a few feeds?
Very high. We're looking 86%-ish that it will go within the first 3 feeds.
I understand there's one notable exception to that in terms of species.
Should we all guess at what that one is?
I don't think we need many guesses. Go on, John.
No, this is the royal python, or ball python for the Americans.
Yeah.
We have not marketed this food for royal pythons. We just haven't. One day we'll crack it. We tried everything with royals. And have royals eaten it? Yes, they have. My personal royal has eaten it once.
Well, your royal's going to do what it's told by John Courteney-Smith, isn't it? But
this is an old sort of 18-year-old royal, and she
just feeds.
She just feeds, and she's, ever since the day that I got her, she landed out of Ghana all those years ago, and she fed on the first day and hasn't really stopped. So I've been really lucky with that.
But in general, royals don't seem to take.
No, so we tried some interesting things. There's this whole concept about genetic memory, and the fact that, I mean, there's papers written about royal pythons and how they perceive shape. So it's not just about scent. So very scent orientated, heat orientated, and some people would say shape orientated. So they perceive the shape of a rodent and whack, they will strike at that.
It would be very interesting to see if we get any feedback from people who watch this, and to tell us if they've had any success with their ball python, raw python. I don't think that story's finished yet, is it?
No, I don't think it's finished. I don't think it's finished at all. Some will, obviously. But we're being honest and saying...
Maybe not royals.
Maybe not, but, spotted pythons, children pythons, blood pythons, carpet pythons. There's many pythons and boas, large and small, that have all proved very reliable feeders.
And lots of lizards too, apparently.
Yeah, so we've been lucky enough to be able to test it in our own collection here. So we've got monitors here. We've got access to blue-tongued skinks, obviously red-foot tortoises, and then obviously Paul works with me now, and he's got his fantastic collection of monitor lizards. So,
and redfoots are a little bit carnivorous in the wild, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Bit, at least omnivorous.
They're prime omnivores. Yes. So you can factor that in.
Yeah.
And certainly for anybody that keeps an omnivorous species, where you would usually feed a rodent, if you want an alternative solution, or you don't feed a carnivore prey source because you don't like or don't want to feed rodents, or somebody in your house doesn't want to have rodents in the house or see that being fed, this is a fantastic solution.
You've just hit on my favourite reason to like this product, and there are many, of course, but having had plenty of circumstances where somebody's gone to my freezer, looked in my freezer, realised what's in my freezer and taken exception, I know from my time in retail there are plenty of examples where we haven't been able to sell a snake just because the idea of keeping rodents in the fridge. And we need to acknowledge the kind of survivorship bias of the reptile trade, in that we only see people who have got over that ick, who've got over that okay, we'll have mice in the freezer. We don't even get to see the people who object to that. We don't know how big that market is.
No, I mean, there's potentially some of the world's best snake keepers out there that have never kept a snake because of their fear. I have the same.
Because of their mom's fear.
Or their mum, or their partner, their grandparent, their brother, sister, whatever it is. I've had to overcome a rodent phobia myself to be able to keep snakes. Yeah. And I'm okay if they're frozen and dead.
Yeah.
But if they're alive, I'm nowhere to be found. That's quite common in the reptile industry, actually. But I know what 100 frozen rodents look like in the bottom of my freezer, and so does my wife. And it is an ick for many, many people, and we really do understand that. Coming out with a food that we believe better replaces farmed rodents in terms of its nutritional profile, that has better portion control, but removes that barrier to keeping, and also removes or changes the amount of space that you need. Just imagine this: if you put 6 or 8 jumbo mice in the bottom drawer of your freezer, we know how much space that takes up. Especially if you've been to the local shop and they're just jumbled in a carrier bag, and you've got pointy bits all over the place, and it could take a third of a drawer.
Yeah, it can.
Evo RX is a small box.
When we first started talking about, responsible reptile keeping and Evo RX, and I use responsible reptile keeping with the lowercase letters, it really appealed to us in several different ways pertaining to our mission. The first one was the obesity issue. That one really made my ears stick up. Yeah. The second one is just the ability of the product to proliferate reptile keeping. Now, we know that reptiles are probably the best pet for most people. People who are busy and have busy lives and don't want to leave a dog at home all day. People who might have allergies to dogs or birds or cats or whatever.
Yeah.
People who just want something that's safe. Reptiles are among the safest pets you can keep. They're the least likely to give you zoonoses, and they're the least likely to attack you in any way that's going to cause you any great damage. There's lots and lots of reasons why reptiles are a good pet for a great many people. So as far as we're concerned, from a welfare responsible keeping perspective, the more people we can accommodate to keep reptiles, the better that is for responsible keeping, for high welfare. So what stops people keeping reptiles? Taste is one thing. People might not want to. But for a certain percentage of people, and I think it's quite high, it's the ick of feeding rodents.
Yeah.
That's something that a lot of people simply can't get over. So if we can attract more keepers, and these people are going to do really well at keeping reptiles and keeping them well by saying you don't have to feed them rodents. Here's an awesome food that solves that problem and solves it really well. That's one of the reasons why we were really interested in this product, and that's one of the reasons why we're proud to be associated, and we'll talk more about that relationship soon. But I just thought it was worth pressing on that because it's such an important reason.
It is, and it's so sad. I grew up in the hobby, in the retail side of the hobby, and have evolved into the more professional side of the hobby, the amount of people that you and I have come across in our lives where you've got X person in a family who is desperate to keep some kind of snake, predominantly snakes, and you know they've got the skill set to be able to do it, but there's one or more person in the house where the rodent thing is just a no. And I do understand that. I really do understand that. But I find it so sad that people that have got that fire of nature in their mind, this affinity with the wild world, that they want to have this relationship with a pet that really means something to them for their whole life, are not able to get into the hobby for whatever reason because of the food.
Hurdle.
Tiny hurdle.
A small hurdle that we've now eliminated.
I mean, I've heard it literally dozens of times visiting shops where you'll hear a member of a family, and it's not always the mum.
Not always the mum, no.
Oh, I don't mind snakes. I think they're great, but I cannot have mice in the house. Okay, that's fine. I actually respect that. But what about that person that really is now desperate for it? Okay, there's other species to keep, but if it's snakes that light your eyes up,
let's do it.
That they should have the right and the luxury to be able to interact with wildlife in that way.
That's very pleasing to us, John, and it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few years now that we have got a solution for that hurdle. But I'd like to hit upon something that we discussed as well, which was another reason why we like it at Responsible Reptile Keeping. Zoonoses, pathogens, and things like that, which is, of course, an issue for all types of food. We know that you can catch salmonella from lettuce.
Absolutely, you can.
So it's all about care of handling. But you've gone a step further with this food.
Well, we're advertising, again, because it's part of UK legislation. This has to be tested for certain pathogens, so mostly Salmonella and Enterobacter, the two watchwords that cause everybody to quake, really. So every single batch is tested and levels have to come under a certain amount. All of those certificates are stored, batch samples are stored. We are following the UK law and EU law really as well, absolutely to the letter. Again, it removes another ick. Well, I hear reptiles give you salmonella. Well, reptiles really only get salmonella from the food that they eat. Good rodents are all tested as well, certainly for salmonella.
Yeah.
So we're making that available on the package. So if you've got your grandparents need to feed your snake while you're on holiday and they're worried about it, they'll know it's been tested.
For our perspective, we like to remove the problems that are thrown at reptile keepers, reptile traders, and weaponized. And we know that you can get all kinds of zoonoses and many worse zoonoses from traditional pets than you can from reptiles. But the salmonella thing has been the kind of the great big worry for everybody for many years. It's not that much of a worry if you adopt good hygiene.
No.
But this just goes a step further and kind of eliminates, or largely eliminates at least, the pathogen worry. So that's another stick that we can't be beat with from a legislative perspective with the adoption of this diet.
I agree. So from multiple fronts as well, because the food is tested before it leaves our facility. It's British made as well. So British labs testing it. There's good traceability there. But of course, every time you buy a box, the box has the instructions that lead to the safest form of use on every box. So as long as you want to read the back of the box, you can remind yourself that how to defrost safely, how to keep the product away from human food, tom feed. Yeah, we're trying to take away as much of the risk as possible within government guidelines.
Which is a very responsible approach to feeding and a very responsible approach to business, which again very much fits our mission. Let's move on, John. I want to cut to the chase. How much does it cost? Because we know how much a mouse costs, so we need to be at least comparable.
Yeah, absolutely. So Evo RX has been priced to be slightly cheaper than the average recommended retail price of frozen rodents. So we wanted this diet to be accessible for everybody. We wanted it to be acceptable for everybody. We wanted it to obviously benefit snake keeping and the snakes, but we also wanted it to be affordable. So the recommended retail of these food sources is slightly less than that of a farmed rodent. The only difference that we're asking you to do is you have to buy a small pack rather than an individual animal. So for the small sizes, there's 10 in a box, and for the larger sizes, there's 6 in a box. But the box is just slightly bigger than the average cigarette packet. So we're only asking you to take up a very small part of your freezer as well. The product inside the box is vacuum packed as well. Individually vacuum packed, so you'll be able to cut out of that vacuum
a single portion.
Yeah, the portion that you need for that feed. Defrost that alongside the instructions that we give on the package and feed that on.
Let's talk about more about the packaging, John, because the packaging looks very nice, as you would expect from an Arcadia product, of course. But there's a lot of information on that box, isn't there?
Yeah, a huge amount of information, most of it relating to health and safety. And of course, there's certain laws within the UK, within our government agencies, of some of the information that we have to show. So some of the information we have to put on there, but it seems a little bit strange for reptile keeping. It has to be there. So it's on there. And this includes full nutritional analysis, and we're showing that wet and dry. So as fed and as dry matter, because I wanted people to have relatability. If you search up historic nutritional values for feeder rodents, depending on where that information comes from around the world, it's either shown wet or dry.
And you need to discern when you're comparing.
Absolutely. So if you show a dry value, it's 3 or 4 times higher than the as fed value. So I didn't want to bring a food to market where one person was saying, wow, the nutrition's very high, or another person saying, wow, the nutrition's very low. So we're showing you both.
You know what you're dealing with.
You know what you're dealing with. And then all of the legality of feeding, defrosting, and then some hints and tips and QR codes to go off to feeding instructions and data sheets.
Yeah.
And it's a small box, but we fit a lot on.
This is why we got really interested in this product when we were talking about it, John, because it seems to be a game changer. It solves a lot of the problems that we've experienced in the hobby before. And I say problems, they're like small amounts of friction that we can get over, but this product does that for us. I like the idea that it'll be broadly available. I like the idea that it's the right price for the mainstream market, for the average pet keeper. I like the idea that it's really easy to store and use, and it has a decent shelf life. And I like that it's clean and easy to use. But most of all, I like that it's convenient, and the fact that you can know exactly what you're feeding every single time.
So what we found is because the feeding parcel is very bioavailable, it releases its nutrition inside the snake without hindrance. What we found, though, again through this long period of testing, this sort of 2 years of live testing, was that snakes' period between feeds elongated.
Okay. So
the nutrition that we were giving them was highly it was satiating their need.
Okay.
Well, what we found, actually, if we, particularly for grown adult healthy snakes, whereas the feeding frequency could be between X date and X date, we had to add on about 20%. If we did that, we went back to the strike position.
Gotcha.
So the food is obviously bioavailable for them. It's satiating their need to feed. It's providing all the nutrition that they need. Therefore, they are more inclined to not miss a feed, but require a feed slightly less. That doesn't really happen for young and growing snakes. Yeah. And certainly hogs seem to want to eat very frequently. But it was just an interesting new bit of evidence, really, of how this food works.
I was speaking to my wife about Evo RX, and the thing that she came up with that was quite interesting was that, so instead of using one animal per feed, this is using one animal per 100 or so feeds.
So I mean, this is a difficult topic. You know, it's a side of reptile keeping that's hard for any animal lover to look at, but our animals have to eat. for the most popular sizes of snake food, being that small mouse, and we ramp up and down from there in the sizes. Actually, we can make 100 feeds from one life.
Animal.
From one animal. From the pink size, it's many, many more rather than one for every single one. So there is
It might not be something that all reptile keepers think about or even concern themselves with, but from a purely ethical perspective, it seems to make it's a step in the right direction, isn't it?
I think so. Ethics are subjective.
Yes, absolutely.
Something that's really important for me might not be very important for you, and X, Y, and Z. We're all in the middle somewhere. We love our animals enough to feed them. However, if the numbers of animals that are produced to feed your animal is important to you, then this greatly reduces that number.
Dependent on your perspective, it could be an important consideration.
Yeah, it certainly is for me.
Okay, so I think we've pretty much covered most of the things that we wanted to discuss, apart from the relationship with responsible reptile keeping. And I have to say, we were really pleased when we discussed this and how it would work, that I understand that for every sale of Evo RX, Arcadia will make a donation to responsible reptile keeping for that sale.
And very happily. We, as a business and personally me, have such respect for the work that you and Vicky are doing, and it's vital for our hobby as people that enjoy interaction with nature, that our hobby is protected. And the only way that we can protect it is to have a vigorous, highly educated movement that can help protect our hobby. So for me, when I was looking at potential sponsorships, I immediately thought of responsible reptile keeping, because we need you. The hobby needs you. Even if you've got a single leopard gecko at home, or a mourning gecko, or something that for some of us might be insignificant, or a collection of 500 snakes, we need our RK. There are threats in this hobby that we dare not consider some of these days. You and I get to hear about some of it, and some of it I hope that the public never hear about.
Well, that's our aim.
I have a 4-year-old boy and a 24-year-old boy. And my 24-year-old boy has lived with me and experienced the natural world from the days of having bird rooms and reptile rooms and being around my job and seeing everything. And my 4-year-old boy has even more of a fire for the wild. He is obsessed with dinosaurs and reptiles and plants, anything that's alive via his imagination. To me, it is wholly offensive and very worrying that he may not have the experience that my eldest son and myself and my father had.
Yeah.
Not to have that interaction with the wild is detrimental to their well-being, to their education and their IQ levels, to their health. You know, all the studies that come out about having access to animals and how that impacts us positively. So for me, having an active sponsorship for responsible reptile keeping ticked every box, because we must go on.
Well, we thank you very much for that, John. It's great to have for brands and companies that support us like Arcadia to have such faith in what we do. We understand that it's important. There's a lot of what we're increasingly calling BS out there, and responsible reptile keeping's job is to counter and challenge and correct the BS. And we can only do that with the support of brands such as Arcadia, and having this association and funding directly from each sale of Evo RX will really help us to do a lot more work in that respect.
Absolutely. So for every pack that's bought, a donation is made to responsible reptile keeping. You are supporting it.
Mm-hmm.
And long may that continue. We are not just happy, but we're proud of this move.
And so are we, John, and we thank you very much. And I think that's a great place to end this interview. If you need any more information about Evo RX, you can go onto their website. There's a hell of a lot of information there for anybody who's interested. And again, just like to say thank you very much for recruiting us to be part of this brand and part of this product. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.